everyone. Welcome back to another episode with the Crime and Coffee Couple. My name's Allison.
And my name is Mike.
Hello, Mike.
Hey, Allison. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
Good. You look cute in your glasses, your purple lavender top. You just got a good little thing going.
Well, you are very sweet. Thank you so much. My contacts are coming to the end of their month, and I can feel it.
There's another, $50 out the window?
No, Mike, I've already got them. It lasts me 6 months each box.
Oh, okay.
So simmer.
I'll get better.
There.
If you're new to our show, we welcome you with open arms. And we want to say, we banter a little bit in the beginning to kind of warm things up. We're at our little coffee shop here, our little Pa and Ma coffee shop on Pa.
And I'm Ma.
Yeah. So we're just an independent podcast, just a couple of kids trying to make it in this world.
We're a couple of old hags.
Yeah, I mean, we're a little older than kids, but we're happy to be your Ma and Pa or whatever you need us to be, and maybe your buddy while you're doing whatever you're doing all day long. So we thank you for coming by and giving us a shot here.
We'll keep you company doing whatever it is you're doing right now.
Yeah, and Allison tells me a new story every week that I haven't heard because I don't listen to true crime at all, and I really have no idea unless I'll name all the murderers that I know. It's now, I was going to say Al Bundy, but it's Ted Bundy. It wasn't even a joke. I was like, Al Bundy.
Bundy.
Ted Bundy. And then we got Dahmer. And I think...
Do you know Dahmer's first name?
Jeffrey.
Okay.
Jeffrey Dahmer. And that's kind of my thing.
That's where it ends.
I think I probably could name a few more. There's the clown guy, Gacy.
Yeah, of course. He's from Illinois, where we grew up and were raised.
I stick to only the best known serial killers. Those are the only best ones I want. Besides that, I know none of these things.
So in other words, Mike knows none of the stories that I'm telling.
Yeah, or a lot about things in life in general. So it's kind of fun. You never know what I'm going to say. But last week, I'm not even going to get into it. So people are complaining about it. But I tell you about things. I don't have a little filter, and it's fine. So how's life going for you?
It's going pretty good. Our son is officially a licensed driver in the state of Florida.
So scary.
It's exciting, and it's also very scary.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have had that first kid getting out there and saying, can I get the car? And you just look at him, you're like, oh, I guess this is it.
And watching him drive away, because our office is in the front of the house, so we see him drive away, and my heart just kind of clenches.
And how long until we stop looking at the Apple Find My Phone thing and
to just track him? He went for pizza yesterday. He went to pick up pizza for us, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, he's going the wrong way.
The kid has no idea where he is unless he's on GPS. And while we were, obviously we did a lot of test driving. We're 50 or 100 hours.
It's 100 hours, and he was driving a ton.
Yeah, he was driving a lot, and I was like, it's really important for you to know where you are. You don't have to know the street names, right? That we're kind of past that, I guess. But just kind of have a general idea. Are you north of your house, south? Don't have to say north or south, but be able to point to it from where we are. And zero idea of where he is for the most part.
I'm pretty good in Florida. I know my directions well, but when I grew up in Illinois, my dad would be like, go south. And I'm like, I have no idea. Of course, I started driving in what we drove in 1994-ish.
Yeah, and there it's
there were no maps.
Yeah, it's like a rite of passage to know the avenues and streets and south and north and Wabash and blah, blah, blah. It's okay, I'm very impressed, okay.
My dad he knows directions very well. He can go to a state he's never been to, and within a little while, he'll know it back, right, center, and forward.
Yeah.
So for me, I lack that. So when I was lost in downtown Chicago, probably days after I got my license on my 16th birthday.
Why'd you go downtown?
Me and the girls, because we could.
Okay.
And so I'm lost, and I had this huge car phone, an actual phone that was installed in my car, only to be used in an emergency.
Well, yeah, because it's probably $1 a minute or something
Probably. So I call my dad panicking, and that's where he's throwing out these cuckoo directions east.
Are you heading east or west? It's your idea is as good as mine. No idea, buddy.
Pick a coin.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you the streets, and you tell me which way I'm going, basically.
Yeah,
right.
So we'll see. He's a responsible driver, but still, there's that fear.
Yeah, and he's a boy, and I was a boy once, and I was stupid. I did a lot of dumb things. I think I took my mom's car over 108 miles an hour on the expressway several times. I wanted to see how fast I can get to this Homewood, the town of Homewood from Orland Park. So
our son seems, knock on wood, I'm knocking on my head, just a little bit more cautious, which I will take that any day over cocky.
Yeah, my friend just recently texted me because he saw that our son got his license. He's like, congrats. He's like, Is he as confident as you were when you started? Because my friend, he bought his own car like 6 months before he even got a license because he's crazy like that. He's been
Probably with
working.
cash.
Yeah, it was like a 1980 Cadillac DeVille or something like that. And yeah, he's very well put together. He knows his deck. He's very responsible. So he had his own car, but he couldn't drive yet. So I turned 16 first. So he's like, all right, you drive. And then when I turn 16, I'll drive. And like, it was awesome. So
Nothing like 15 and 16-year-olds in an old caddy.
oh, it was amazing. Like everybody knew we were coming along. And like, if we got in an accident, we weren't going to get hurt.
That thing was
a
freaking tank.
Absolutely. And he was like, yeah, you were good right away. And like, he was good right away too. We were both good drivers.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully in the best form. We'll see.
Are you ready to jump into this?
I think so.
All right. So this is a story of Whitney Cerak and Laura Van Ryn. So before 2006, the Cerak and Van Ryn families were for the most part unaware of each other. Yet each of their daughters attended Taylor University, and this is a small evangelical.
Evangelical, very good.
I don't know why that word I have to think about it before I say it.
It's just that word. You have no problem with any other words at all.
Evangelical Christian school, and this is in Upland, Indiana, and both families were from Michigan. However, a tragic accident that happened in April 2006 catapulted both families into an emotional journey when they found themselves in an unimaginable twist of fate, and their lives from that moment on were forever intertwined. So in the spring of 2006, when 22-year-old Laura Van Ryn wasn't on Taylor's campus during the school year, she lived in Caledonia, Michigan with her family and her parents. Her parents are Don and Susie. She had an older sister, Lisa, and two brothers, Kenny and Mark. And she and her boyfriend, Aaron, they had been dating for quite a while at this point in time, for 3 years, and marriage was likely just assumed. It was just assumed that they were going to be married. So according to Susie, her daughter was an absolute joy, and she just thrived being around people. So she said she was always where everybody was. She was happy, giggly, real, and genuine. Meanwhile, Whitney Cerak was 18 years old. She had grown up in Gaylord, Michigan, with her parents. This is Newell and Colleen. She had an older sister, Carly. And according to Colleen, her daughter was an amazing girl. She was always just so much fun to be around, and she had a knack for just making people feel special. So because the Cerak family was 2.5-hour drive from the Van Ryn family, they never crossed paths with each other. Of course, both of their daughters are at Taylor University, but they're in their own towns and doing their own thing.
Were they roommates?
No.
Okay.
So while Laura was a senior at Taylor University, Whitney was a freshman. So both girls were very friendly and outgoing and attracted a large circle of friends. And though they may have been familiar with one another, they didn't know each other well. So the spring semester was wrapping up. It was coming to an end of 2006, and Whitney noticed a sign-up sheet. It was for basically volunteering to go to a banquet set up for an incoming university president, and this was being held at Taylor's Fort Wayne campus. So being the type of girl who was eager to surround herself with others and have the opportunity to try something new and different, Whitney quickly signed up. So going into that day, she did find that she felt some nerves brewing because she was going to be the youngest one there. She was going to be the only freshman. She also didn't know any of the other names on the list, at least very well.
Yeah, very courageous of her.
Right. But she did realize, and she woke up the next morning. It was Wednesday, April 26, 2006. When she got there, she realized that her nerves were all for nothing, since their group ended up just being really cool. Everyone was open. You know how it is when you get together with people and you just kind of fall right in. There's none of that clickiness.
Yeah, right away you got some friendly people just like, hey, how are you? What do you do? And yeah, just you get it right away.
And that was the vibe. Everyone was extremely fun, welcoming, and friendly. So the group of 9, 7 of which were students, headed out in the university's van for the campus that was situated, like I said, in Fort Wayne, and this was an hour north of where their campus was. So during the drive, as Whitney and Laura chatted, they both realized that they were each from rural towns in Michigan, and despite their 4-year age gap, they quickly hit it off. They just, gelled and had a lot to talk about. So throughout their day in Fort Wayne, the group of volunteers, they were setting up tables and decorations in the banquet hall. Like I said, this was all in preparation for an event that was being held the following night, basically welcoming in the new university's president. So afterwards, they stopped off for pizza, and then somewhere around 8 p.m., they all climbed back into the university's van in order to make their way to the main campus, and they were driving down Interstate 69. So sometime between 8 and 8:30, Susie was trying to get a hold of Laura, but she wasn't able to get through, so she just figured she would talk to her daughter sometime later. And meanwhile, Lisa, she had been playing phone tag with her younger sister in the days before. And while they were on their way to Fort Wayne that day, Laura had actually left a message for her sister Lisa, but she hadn't had a chance to call her back to that point. So Carly Cerak, this is Whitney's older sister, she was also a student at Taylor. So she was on campus at the university. So she was the first to hear that something was wrong after her friend Ben drove up and told her that there had been an accident. And he believed that Whitney may have been involved. So with this, Carly was immediately concerned and she started dialing her sister's phone. But there was no answer, and she continued to call over and over, and each time she was unable to get through. And I'm sure she was just like pleading, please pick up, please pick up.
Yeah, I just want to hear that you're okay.
Right. So it wasn't long before Carly noticed people were rushing around. They looked a little bit panicked, and they were asking her, have you spoken with Whitney? So word soon spread that the accident had been a serious one, and some of the passengers from the university in the van had died. So Whitney and Carly's mom, this is Colleen, she is 5 hours away at their home in Gaylord. And meanwhile, their dad, Newell, was on a church trip. He was in Mississippi at the time. So when Carly was trying to get a hold of her parents about what she was being told, she was initially unable to reach either one of them. So it was about 10 p.m. when Colleen, meanwhile, is on the phone with her husband, Newell. And he started hearing beeps from call waiting coming through, but they just kind of shrugged it off. They were literally mid-conversation. They figured whoever's calling will call me back, in a little bit. So they were catching up, and it wasn't until then the call waiting started beeping in on Colleen's end that they were like, okay, maybe we need to go ahead and figure out what's going on. So Colleen switches over, and it's Carly on the other end of the line. And she told her mom that they needed to pray. And she told her what was going on, what she was hearing around campus. And I can't imagine as a mom not knowing what's going on and fearing that your daughter could be one of the casualties from this accident.
Well, it's very much like we were talking about before the episode started. And it's, you send your son or daughter out there and you're tracking them on your GPS. Like they didn't have that at the time, but then you always fear, like, am I going to get that call? And they got a call and it's saying there was an accident. I'm not sure if she's involved. And it's like, oh my God, please say my baby wasn't there.
It's like your worst nightmare. Yeah. So it was just about this same time that the phone also rang inside the Van Ryn home. And this is where Susie, Don, and Lisa were. They were at their home in Caledonia. So as Susie picked up the phone, preparing to hear the voice of maybe a telemarketer, she was told that Laura had been involved in a serious accident. And she was told that she was in critical condition at a hospital in Fort Wayne. So within minutes, the Van Ryns jumped into their car in order to make the 2.5-hour drive to Fort Wayne. So they're driving there not knowing exactly what they're going to find. So they are speeding towards the hospital. And in that time, staff was contacting them at various points. And they are trying to just struggle to process just how quickly their lives had changed. They were having just a normal evening, and now they don't know if their daughter is going to survive. They have no idea as they're hearing the severity of her injuries. So they were told that she was unconscious, that she had some broken bones as well as a head injury, and they needed to give consent in order to place a tube into their daughter's head to monitor her intracranial pressure. So they were terrified, and they were praying that she would still be alive when they arrived there, and their drive obviously seemed endless. So while the Van Ryn family made their way to the hospital, the Cerak family was just waiting by the phone, desperate to hear what condition Whitney was in. And meanwhile, Newell did the same, and he's in Mississippi. They're not even together at this point. So he is hoping and praying that his line is going to ring, and it's going to be his wife, Colleen, and she is going to say that their daughter would be okay. So neither family could have ever imagined just how terrible this crash actually was. So an 80,000-pound tractor trailer that was fully loaded was driving north on I-69 while the school's van was heading south. So the driver, this is Robert Spencer, he had fallen asleep behind the wheel, and he barreled across the median into the southbound lanes, right into the path of the university's van. So upon impact, the van was torn open. The impact caused the passengers to launch from the vehicle while their belongings were strewn about the interstate. So 5 of the 9 passengers were killed instantly, while others suffered injuries, some serious. One woman was thrown 50 feet, and by the time paramedics arrived, she was barely breathing. She was quickly airlifted to Parkview Hospital. This is the nearest trauma center to where the accident was in Fort Wayne, and this is the same hospital that the Van Ryns were instructed to drive to. So when the family arrived at about 1:15 a.m., they were met with somewhere around 20 of Laura's friends. They were basically in the waiting room of the hospital. They were greeted with hugs and tears. At this point, Laura was still alive, but there was so much uncertainty still. It was basically just going to be a wait and see type of situation as to whether she would survive. And if she did survive, there was no telling what her mental state would ever be. So meanwhile, at about 10:45 p.m., this is hours earlier and 2 hours after the accident, Colleen Cerak received a phone call from the coroner. And through her shock and devastation, she recalls hearing the word sorry as she heard the unimaginable news that her baby girl, Whitney, was gone. She was dead. She had not survived.
That's terrible.
She just recalls dropping the phone. She fell to her knees and she just began sobbing. And she quickly ended the call so that she could contact Newell. Of course, I said he was in Mississippi. And as he heard his wife's voice on the other end of the line, he's 1,000 miles away from where she's calling from. He desperately prayed that she would say, "Whitney's okay." And after he heard her say, "Newell, I'm sorry," he really doesn't recall much else after that. So knowing how heartbroken Colleen was, the family pastor offered to break the devastating news to Carly because, of course, she's on Taylor's campus. But by that point, she had already rushed to Marion General Hospital in Indiana in hopes that she would find her sister alive. However, she was told that Whitney had been dead for hours. Her body was literally only a few feet away from where she stood, but Carly was far too distraught and devastated to see her sister's remains. After Carly was taken into another room, she was given her sister's purse, which had been found next to her body. Just the sight of her sister's things only further broke her heart because she could smell the odor of gasoline coming off of her items. They were dirty, the contents were broken, and as she looked down at the mangled contents, she could only imagine that this is exactly what happened to her sister. So while Newell made travel arrangements to fly back home from Mississippi, their pastor offered to drive Colleen to Indiana 5 hours away. And when she arrived at the hospital, just like her daughter, Colleen was so distraught, she was so devastated and heartbroken that she also declined to see Whitney's body because she wanted to remember her daughter as she always was, a lively, beautiful, vibrant person. So 6 hours later and 50 miles away, Laura's family remained at Parkview Hospital in Fort Wayne, and they were preparing to go into her room in the ICU to see her for the first time after this horrifically tragic accident. And they were told, you guys have to prepare yourselves. She's not going to look like herself. There are tubes coming out of her body in various points. She's very bruised up. And as they entered the room, much of their daughter's face was obstructed from machines and tubes, including a ventilator that was allowing her to breathe. Her face was very swollen. She had some minor cuts. And it was heartbreaking to see their daughter just lying there in bed, not moving. And, you expect them to just wake up and be their funny, usual self. Mm-hmm. And that had to have been just so helpless of a feeling.
Imagine how any family walking in and seeing that. And especially the medical people know that people are walking in every day and seeing people and expecting something and seeing another thing and just being like, wow, this is real. My loved one is all clinging on to life.
Right. Clinging on to life. And there's no guarantee of who, like what they're going to be like after, if they're going to survive it at all.
Until they wake up, if they even do.
So Don and Susie, obviously they did. They felt utterly helpless. So while they were there, they were given Laura's belongings, which included a purse, a wallet, as well as a pair of shoes that they didn't recognize. But, she's a college student and girls are always borrowing and sharing things, so they thought nothing of it. So throughout the time that Laura remained in ICU, Susie began a prayer journal. And I will tell you, both families are very devoted to their faith. So she used this journal to include writings that she planned to eventually share with her daughter if and when she recovered. So she wrote, "To my sweet sunshine girl, hooked up to tubes was almost more that I could do." So on Thursday, April 27th, this is one day after the crash, Taylor University held a prayer service for the victims, and Colleen attended as names of the victims flashed on a large projector screen. Everyone prayed for each victim, and even Whitney's name came up on the screen, and when Whitney's name came up on the screen, Colleen felt a sense of peace because she was sitting there and everyone in that room was praying for them and for her daughter. And that just gave her a sense of comfort that so many people were praying for them. And everything just felt so surreal at that point in time. It really hadn't even sunk in for them that their daughter was gone.
Yeah.
And she did feel strength, though, in that moment in time, and she was fueled by her strong faith. So as Newell boarded his flight back to Michigan, it felt unreal that the world was just normally continuing on around him. You know, he's seeing people order coffee and board the plane, carefree.
People hugging each other and going about their day and like being like, man, like you almost want to come up to you, be like, I'm so sorry, I don't know you, but I know you just lost your daughter. And it's like, nope, everybody's going about their day.
Right. And he's sitting there in his seat on the airplane, just bogged down by unimaginable pain and loss.
And he knows when he comes back, his daughter won't be there.
Right. So he was met by Colleen and Carly at the airport, and no words were spoken. They only held one another and sobbed. And they made their way to Whitney's dorm room. And I can't imagine, and I'm just getting tearful just thinking about what it must be like to go from a family of 4 to now a family of 3.
Yeah. And you feel it's like temporary. It's like, okay, no, she'll be better and be back. And it's like, no, she's gone forever. We were a family of 4 forever. And now, just like that, we're a family of 3.
In an instant.
Yeah.
So they had to drive to Whitney's dorm in order to gather her belongings. And of course, they're walking in her dorm and everything is just frozen in time. Just as she walked out of the room that day to take the bus to, the Fort Wayne campus is how they found her things.
Like she had just slept in that bed. She had just used all those things in that room. It's
right.
like, man, I wish she was here.
So they had to gather her belongings and then make their way back home. And as they drove, Colleen had to write her daughter's obituary. She wrote, "Whitney Aaron Cerak, age 18 of Gaylord, died in a tragic car accident Wednesday, April 26, 2006 in Marion, Indiana. She lived a wonderful and full but short life. She was a freshman at Taylor University where she was growing in love and knowledge of her friend and savior, Jesus Christ. She is now living with him in heaven." And meanwhile, the Van Ryn family was holding a vigil at their daughter's bedside 24/7, and she remained critically injured in the ICU. So Lisa decided to start a blog on Friday, April 28th. This was 2 days after the crash, as a way to keep her loved ones and anyone, any friend, family member, anyone that cared, updated about her sister's condition and her progress. So that day she wrote, "Her left leg," and in parentheses she put femur, "and left elbow are broken and have been placed in casts. Her right clavicle bone is broken also and is in a sling right now. She has some fractured ribs and an array of cuts and bruises. It is apparent that she feels pain, which is actually a good sign. The worst of Laura's injuries weren't even visible from the outside. On the inside, however, her brain, it was seriously damaged, and there's nothing but time because obviously it needs to heal. So the impact of the crash was just incredible, and it caused her brain to slam around inside her skull. So like I said, only time would tell if she would begin to, the swelling would go down, she would start to heal, and then she would wake up. And that had to have been really hard to just not know. You just have to be faithful and wait.
Well, I mean, think about what hit them. A fully loaded big truck.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is so heavy. And that's just something that just pulverized them.
Literally ripped the van in half.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, Whitney's family, they held a visitation one day before her funeral on Saturday, April 29th. And the line stretched on as mourners came up to pay their respects and share moments of how Whitney touched their lives during her own short life. Despite their pain, these words brought them comfort on a day that just so happened to fall on her birthday. So since their daughter was a lover of birthdays, they played videos from her earlier birthday parties on a TV, and as images flashed across a screen of Whitney smiling, It was a comfort to see her joy and hear her laugh, and it helped them all celebrate the life that she lived, despite the fact that it was far too short. So, because of the extent of her injuries, Whitney's casket was closed during her funeral, which was held the following day. And in a church that held 1,100 people, more than 1,400 people attended, and the Cerak family felt surrounded by love on such a horribly sad day. So now back in Fort Wayne on May 2nd, this is 6 days after the accident, Lisa updated her blog about Laura's recovery, and she wrote, "Laura's surgeries today went great. They set her broken leg and elbow and added a couple of plates for stabilization. She'll get to be more entertaining going through metal detectors now. The tracheostomy went very well also. There is no longer anything in her mouth, so rather than her being orally intubated, they would do a tracheostomy, so the tube wouldn't be coming out of her mouth any longer." So she wrote, "All tubes, etc. have been removed. Laura's color has improved a great deal, and she is also moving quite a bit." So by this point, Laura was still in intensive care. She was still in a coma, and she remained heavily bandaged, and her face was still very swollen. But through it all, her family remained at her bedside through every single moment. And despite the fact that she couldn't respond, they would talk to her and they would tell her who had come to see her that day, what they were doing, and they would try to keep the conversation very positive. So they told her that she was doing so great and that her hair looked particularly good that day, that all the flowers were blooming since it was springtime. And they also sang her favorite songs. And since she was in ICU, visitors were limited as to how many you could have at a time. So basically what happened, it was a constant rotating revolving door of people coming in and out to see her. So as time ticked by, Laura began moving gradually more and more. And at times she would even follow prompts, and that had to have been very encouraging.
Yeah, it means the brain's working.
Right. So, sometimes she would squeeze someone's hand when she was asked to do so, wiggle her toes, squint her closed eyes. And again, these are very positive signs for the Van Ryn family to see, and this was only boosting their hope that she would wake up and that she would understand what was being said. So one day, they're sitting in the ICU, and Lisa was at her sister's bedside, and she noticed that Laura opened her mouth to yawn. And when she did, she noticed that her two teeth on either side of her front teeth, they just looked different from how she remembered them looking. And she also tried to think about the horrific car accidents. And Mike's looking up at the ceiling right now. I think he knows.
Yep, this is crazy. Okay.
So she's thinking about the horrifically awful accident scene and the fact that Laura had been found up against a fence, and likely her teeth had shifted on impact. So now on Sunday, May 7th, Taylor University held a memorial service for the 4 students and 1 staff member who had died during the crash. Whitney's family, they drove over to attend, and on their way, they actually passed the accident site. So they pulled off and they got out of their car, and they noted 5 crosses on the side of the road, and they were able to see the location where their daughter had lost their life. And they noted the large crevices in the median that were torn up from the truck coming across the traffic. So before attending the memorial service, a dinner was held at the home of a university's president, and they were able to meet the university official who actually was the one to identify Whitney's body. And the man was a very good friend of theirs, so they had the opportunity to thank him for what he did for them because they didn't want to be the ones to do it. So Susie and Don, they left Laura's bedside in order to attend the memorial service as well. And Newell Cerak gave a touching speech about his daughter Whitney as victims' photos were shown up on the projector screen. And it was during this time that the Cerak family had the opportunity to meet the Van Ryn family. And they each told each other that they were both praying for them, and the Ceraks had been following along on Lisa's blog. They were checking in on Laura's recovery on a near daily basis. And that same day, Lisa updated the blog and she wrote, "Laura is still sporting the pigtails, and her face is looking quite normal. There is virtually no swelling at all." So by this point in time, Laura had been in a coma for 11 days, and the blog's following had truly started to grow, and word spread all over the world about what had happened. So Lisa went on to write that Laura was breathing on her own. She was sitting in a chair and she looked peaceful. She did remain unconscious at this point, but she was moving more and more with each passing day. So, being in the hospital, there was naturally a lack of privacy. And one day, Lisa got a surprise when she noticed that her sister's navel was pierced. And this was something she was unaware of. It actually made her chuckle a little bit, but she just shrugged it off.
Yeah, college, experimenting.
And it wasn't long before the Van Ryn family, they were rejoicing a major step forward when Laura opened her eyes for the very first time since the crash. One eye was only open a slit. It was very glassy. It was very unfocused, but far more improved with how she had, started. And this was obviously very encouraging for them. So after 20 days of being in a coma, Laura gradually began to wake up. And in Lisa's blog post from May 16th, she wrote about Laura speaking for the very first time. And in a very weak, hoarse voice, she managed to say, "Hi." And with each new improvement, the family celebrated each and every win. You have to, because it's just slow baby steps of improvement.
It's gigantic. I mean,
huge.
From maybe possibly being dead to saying hi. That's amazing.
Right. And the fact that she can speak and she knows what hi means.
Hopefully more from here.
So meanwhile, the Cerak family, they were trying to get themselves back into a life that felt anything but normal. Because like I said, they went from being a family of 4 now to a family of 3 without Whitney there by their side. So Carly was back at Taylor University for the first time since the accident, while Newell and Colleen, they returned to work and to a home that just felt empty without her. Their days were basically a blur at this point in time.
Sure, understandably.
So on May 18th, this is 3 weeks after the crash, Laura was transferred from the hospital to Spectrum Health Continuing Care Rehab Center. This is in Grand Rapids, less than 30 minutes from their home. So Lisa wrote a blog post on May 22nd to answer a question that was asked by many of the followers. Is Laura out of the coma? And she explained that yes, she was, but it did not mean that she was sitting in a room at rehab, bright-eyed and chatting and stuff
hey,
like
everybody,
that.
Give me some drinks. Yeah.
Nothing like that.
I need a coffee.
So she was not necessarily even fully aware of what was going on at this point in time.
The brain's still healing.
Exactly my next line. Her brain was still recovering, and the process was going to be a very slow and gradual one. It's just like if you broke your leg, it wouldn't heal overnight.
Yeah, except this is your brain, and it runs the entire body.
Right. So when her boyfriend of several years, this is Aaron, he came to visit, he noticed that Laura's eyes were bluer than he recalled them being. And they kind of had a greenish hue to them. So on May 26, Lisa wrote that Laura was starting to open her eyes quite a bit. They were still unsure what she was focusing on when she did open her eyes. And when they asked her, "Do you see something?" she would often nod and kind of respond, but it wasn't entirely clear if she was recognizing them at that point. So 1 month now after the crash, while Laura, she's at rehab at this point in time, she is undergoing intensive therapy in order to do all the things that we all take for granted every single day. How to walk, how to talk. And as her speech slowly improved, the Van Ryns grew concerned by some of the things that she was saying. She called Lisa both Carly and April, as well as one other name, and they just made the assumption that she was just mixing up various staff members because, of course, she was dealing with staff at the hospital. Now she's at the rehab center, and her brain is healing. So Laura also called her boyfriend, Aaron, Hunter, and told him to lie down. So because she had suffered a traumatic brain injury, it was no surprise that she was mixing things up. So she was shown a photo of her roommates, and they were very encouraged by the fact that their daughter was able to name each person in that photo. So they saw that she still had her very strong soccer legs. And normally if she was just kind of sitting in the room in her chair, they would see that she was jiggling her leg, like almost like that nervousness, just out of habit, just like she'd always done. So Memorial Day, it was actually the first time since the accident that the family spent any time away from Laura. They were visiting with family and friends, although Don did come by at some point that day and he attended a physical therapy session with his daughter. And when the therapist asked her to write her name on paper, she wrote the name, what?
Whitney.
She wrote the name Whitney.
I had to look at my notes. Whitney. Yeah.
So
as soon as you said that, I'm like, man, this sucks, but is awesome. It's sucks for half the family and is fantastic for the other side.
Just unreal.
I can't, and it makes a lot. I mean, you're going to talk about it. I have so much to say. Go ahead.
So the therapist asked Don, does she know someone named Whitney? And Don said, yeah, actually, there was a girl in the accident with her. They had spent the entire day together that day. And, Laura said, Don said to the therapist, Laura just so happened to be sitting next to Whitney in the van on impact. So as Don wheeled his daughter back from therapy, he could hear her mumble something. So he leaned closer to hear her better, and he heard the words, false parents. So as the day progressed, friends of the Van Ryns, they joined them for dinner at the rehab center. And when Susie asked Aaron to wheel her over to say hi, she noticed a strange look pass over her friends' faces. But they didn't say anything. The moment passed and they just moved on. So meanwhile, Lisa headed over to see her sister after she had spent much of the day with her friends. So she was just sitting there hanging out with her sister. Her sister had fallen asleep. And she looked at her sister's face, and this is truly the moment that doubt started to creep into her mind and into her heart. She thought about that moment in the hospital when her sister yawned and her teeth looked different. She thought her sister's eyes just looked too blue. So when she got home, she didn't say anything to anyone at this point in time, but she grabbed a CD that they had been given that was played at Whitney's funeral. And as Whitney's face came on the screen, Lisa was able to see her teeth. And immediately she was brought back to that moment in the ICU when her sister yawned, and she and her brother noticed that her sister's teeth looked different than she remembered. And she's looking at Whitney's teeth, and those are the teeth that she is looking at the rehab center.
Unbelievable.
So that night, Susie wrote in her journal that she could not bear having Laura taken from her. She said, "Could I not know my own daughter? Oh God, help me." So this was when doubt truly began to set in that the girl that they had been holding vigil next to might not be their daughter. And if it wasn't, she would need her true parents right away. So Don was still holding out any shred of hope that this actually was Laura, and maybe something about the accident just changed things. So the next day, when he spoke with his friends that had met them the previous evening to have dinner at the rehab center, they spoke with him about their doubts that the girl they saw was their daughter. Because remember, she saw a strange look pass over their faces.
Yeah.
So Susie and Don decided to find out how the bodies at the crash site had been identified. And as they made various phone calls, they were told that the contents of the van had been strewn around and visual ID had been made at the scene. So at this same time, Lisa was attending a therapy session with Laura. And when the therapist instructed Laura to throw the ball to your sister, Lisa believed in her heart that this was not her sister. So after the session, Lisa knelt down in order to be face to face and said, "Can you tell me your name?" And immediately she responded, "Whitney." And when she asked what her parents' names were, she said Newell and Colleen. And this was something that Laura wouldn't have had any clue of what Whitney's parents' names were.
Right.
And this sealed the truth for her that this was Whitney Cerak, not Laura Van Ryn.
My God. Like, you just go through this whole traumatic experience of your sister going through an accident, and you're like, all right, you're getting so helpful and hopeful that like you're seeing good signs, and you're keeping this journal, and you get all these people, praying for you, and you got this blog and they're all excited. And then you're like, oh no, but you're not mad that this other person's alive, but your own sister is gone. Unfreaking believable.
So somehow in this moment, Lisa managed to remain calm, and she wheeled Whitney back, because now she knows this is Whitney. This is not Laura. She wheeled Whitney back to her room and spoke to her parents. Realization was hitting them that they knew exactly where Laura was, and she was gone. But before they could even acknowledge their grief, their first priority was contacting Newell and Colleen.
Yeah.
They called them, the phone calls basically happened on Wednesday, May 31st. This is 5 weeks since the fatal accident. So now the phone is ringing at 2 a.m. inside the Cerak home, and it was the Grant County coroner and the Grant County coroner and the Grant County chaplain
At 2
at
a.m.?
2 a.m.
What the hell's wrong with them?
So this time, Colleen was home with Carly as Newell is on another trip. He's in New Jersey, and this is the very first church trip he had taken since that horrible, horrible night when he got the phone call about his daughter. So after she was asked if she was home alone, she explained that she was there with her daughter, and they instructed her, okay, go wake her up, go get Carly so that she could be with you when we tell you what we're going to tell you.
Jeez.
So they say to her, we have reason to believe that your daughter Whitney is alive. So nothing made sense about the words that they were hearing. They had been at Whitney's funeral. They had watched as her casket was lowered into the earth. So they asked her to bring dental records. And at that point, Carly did not believe for a second that it was her sister, since she is close friends with some of Laura's friends. They had all gone down and visited Laura at the hospital or at the rehab center. No one said a thing about it. So after Carly and her mom got Whitney's dental records, they made the 2.5-hour drive to the rehab center. All of this happened in the middle of the night. So now they're in Grand Rapids and the sun is rising, and they were arriving and they were brought back to this room. So now they get to see for the first time, because they just can't believe it. They can't believe they're going to walk into this room and potentially see Whitney.
Is this really my daughter? Is this really my sister?
Right.
This is like a miracle almost.
Because they have had 5 weeks to try to come to terms with the fact that Whitney is gone. So I can't even imagine how surreal this had to have felt.
I mean, their heartbeat must have been out of their chest, like insane.
So as soon as they pushed that door open and peeked at the girl's face who was lying in the bed, they knew immediately that this was Whitney.
Oh, that had to be so awesome.
Oh, so they began to scream and cry as they ran over to hug her. And Newell recalls the phone call this time around that came through. This time he is told that his daughter is actually alive, which is obviously in stark contrast to the call he had received 5 weeks earlier.
Yeah, and I'm sure everybody would agree taking that call at 2 a.m. is much better than saying your daughter's gone.
Any day. So the Cerak family was instantly catapulted from grief to elation and disbelief. So the dental records sealed the fate for the Van Ryn family, who went from doubt to devastation when it was confirmed that their daughter was gone.
As happy as the one family was, the other one was exactly the opposite. And like, oh my gosh, how terrible.
So terrible. So Don recalls the moment he realized that he needed to call his sons to tell them that they had lost their sister. So when Don and Susie were later asked if they felt it would have been easier to lose Laura on the night of the accident rather than 5 weeks later, they weren't sure. But either way, it was something that is not supposed to happen, that parents are not supposed to lose their children.
Well, my answer would be like, I don't know. Like, what a stupid question. It sucks either way. Like, don't ask me that. Like, if that's a member of the media, like, shut up. Like, it's horrible.
Yeah. I mean, they're in like such a state of grief and shock.
Yeah.
So the Cerak family was soon reunited with the Van Ryns at the rehab center, and Donna and Susie, they were actually really nervous. They were worried how Colleen and Newell would feel about them. They kind of felt foolish, like they would be like, what the hell is wrong with you? How did you let this happen for 5 weeks? You know, but what it came
you had
down
our daughter.
to,
You didn't recognize your own daughter, whatever. It's like, I don't know. Your brain wants certain things certain ways. I can totally see how this could happen.
Of course. So the Cerak family, they held absolutely no ill will toward the Van Ryns for not recognizing the mistake sooner. And there were hugs and tears and compassion shared. Newell arrived later that day after having driven 14 hours from New Jersey.
I mean, if it's on anybody, it's on the guy who identified the girls. So it has nothing to do with the family. The family's like, your daughter's alive? Like, you don't think like, oh, is this my daughter? Are you sure? You're just like so happy. And you see all the machines in her and everything. And you're just like, please, our baby, and praying and all that. And it's like, you're trying to process everything. It's like, you're not like, is this really my kid?
Of course, you would never have any reason to think that.
All right.
So those that had been following Lisa's blog were stunned when she posted about the mistaken identity and the fact that her sister was actually gone. The mix-up had also made world headlines, and the attention during their time of mourning was just horrific for the Van Ryn family. They just wanted to privately grieve, yet the whole world knew about this. So people across the world marveled at how a family who had spent 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at a young girl's bedside over the course of 5 weeks had not recognized them as their loved one. But like you said, they had no reason to believe that this wasn't their daughter, and they were told from the get-go, she's going to look different.
Yeah, and your brain wants the person to be alive, so you're gonna accept certain things. Like you're. It's like when you look at a human face, it might be discombobulated, it just looks different, But like you're accepting, like this is my daughter. This is just who she is. I'm so glad she's alive, and that's it.
Right. So it all began at the crash site, which was described as utter chaos, where 2 women's purses containing their photo IDs were switched. The coroner acknowledged that no scientific testing had been done to confirm with certainty the identities of the deceased, as state law at that time did not require that. So no member of Whitney's family had requested to see her body because they didn't want to see her in that state. Yet on the surface, Laura and Whitney, they were both young, they were both blonde, attractive females, but there were key differences when it came down to it. Obviously, we've talked about their teeth, their eye color, the navel piercing, and truly what it comes down to is the fact that Whitney is about 4 inches taller than Laura, but most of the time she was in bed, in the ICU.
Yeah,
so that
she's
would
not
have been
standing up.
something that you wouldn't have been able to tell.
Right.
So Don Van Ryn indicates because they were prepared by hospital staff, like I said, as easy for me to say, made their way to see Laura, that she would look altered. So they walked into the room and they saw the tubes, the fact that her face was swollen, her eyes were swollen shut, she wasn't speaking, and they were in a highly emotional, fragile state at that point in time. So more than 100 different people had come to visit her. Not one person questioned a thing until Memorial Day when the friends gave looks. That was the first and only time, and that was 5 weeks later.
That's because that's after a lot of the healing happened
Right.
and everything, and she was probably unrecognizable until then.
So Whitney later indicated that beginning on the night of the crash, this is April 26, 2006, there is a large gap in her memory. She recalls working at the banquet, having fun. They stopped for pizza afterwards. The next thing she recalls is rolling over in a hospital bed, and she was seeing her mom crying a lot. The space in between when the Van Ryn family held vigil at her bedside, believing she was Laura, is mostly blank. She really does not remember that at all. She acknowledges that it must have truly messed with her mind to wake up and see strangers at her bedside.
Well, then you're like, oh my God, I don't remember my mom and dad.
Right. And then they're calling her a different name. They're calling her Laura. She's coming out of a coma.
Yeah. You're like, I guess I think my name's something else. I'm going crazy. Clearly, this hemorrhaging in the brain isn't working very well.
I don't even know if she was like grasping the fact that, her brain had suffered so much damage.
Right.
I can't imagine. But Whitney knew of Laura, like I said before, this horrific day. But the day of the crash really was the first time the two had ever really talked and connected. When she was asked if she ever noticed a resemblance between them, she said it never occurred to her. So Whitney went on to visit the cemetery where her parents had buried a woman that they believed to be her. She's also listened to a tape from her funeral service, which obviously felt completely surreal. She got to hear what people said about her.
Pretty damn cool, if you ask me. I mean, that's amazing. I would love to hear that.
Apparently, her sister didn't think she showered enough. Apparently, someone from their church didn't think she was ever a true athlete.
Oh my gosh, then.
So some truth came out.
Yeah, you're like, well, tell me the truth. Here we are.
So, meanwhile, the Cerak family is reflecting on the tremendous gift they were given. I mean, they were, for 5 weeks, they were under the impression that their child was gone forever.
And they're a 3-person family. And then all of a sudden, you're back to how it was.
I can't even. It's like, you can't even make this up. So meanwhile, Laura Van Ryn's body was removed from the cemetery near Whitney's home about a week after the mix-up was discovered, and she was moved near where her own family lives on June 4th, and then on June 4th, they held a memorial service for Laura, and everyone gathered to share their memories of time spent with such a compassionate, kind, young, remarkable woman. It's just like they completely switched spots, you know? Yep. So Lisa Van Ryn, she wrapped up her blog with one final post and she wrote, "Our final encouragement to all of this. Do not hang on to the things of this world too tightly. Life here is but a vapor and there is eternity ahead. As you remember the Van Ryn and Cerak families, let us encourage you to look to your neighbors as well. God calls us to love. So Indiana now has a bill in place that sets clear standards for identifying accident victims. Robert Spencer, the truck driver who hit the van, he pleaded guilty to criminal negligence. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Neither family has filed a lawsuit in this case, and it is their goal to forgive and to move forward. The Cerak and Van Ryn families came together. They actually wrote a book, and it is called Mistaken Identity. Taylor University built a prayer chapel in honor of the 5 victims who lost their lives in the crash. This is students Laura Van Ryn, Brad Larson, Laura Erb, Betsy Smith, and university staff member Monica Felver. 4 months after the accident, Whitney returned to campus at Taylor. She graduated with her class. She was right on track 3 years later. But it was not an easy road. She continued to struggle with her recovery, both mentally and physically. She felt a deep sadness. She had really bad survivor's guilt for being the only student to have survived. She felt broken. She retreated into herself. However, her community truly rallied around her, and paired with her strong faith, she was guided through her pain. And Whitney Cerak is now Whitney Wheeler. She is a married mother of 3 living in Indiana with her family. And that is the story of how the Van Ryn and Cerak families became intertwined forever.
Man, what an insane story. And the whole time I was thinking, okay, why are you telling us about both of these people? Why are you telling us? And then you say the tooth thing. I'm like, yep, now I know why. And this is insane. And we're so glad that Whitney made it, and so sad that Laura didn't. So crazy. What crazy set of circumstances.
I had never heard of this story. Somehow I missed this. I think we were in our early 20s relocating to Florida at this point in time. And I brought it up to my mom, and she immediately knew this story.
Your mom's like a sharp detective. She knows all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's such a crazy story. Like, this is something, they wrote a book, you said, right?
Yeah.
And it would probably be an intense movie, I would imagine, if you get the right people involved. Like,
right.
This is a crazy story. Like, the humans love stories, and unfortunately, it's like so good and so bad at the same time.
I mean, someone's feeling elation and joy while someone else is feeling disbelief and agony.
And then you almost like Laura's family's kind of forgotten about, because it's like, well, there's such the comeback, that like somebody almost went from dead to alive, but it's like, yeah, but also somebody went from alive to dead.
Right.
So that's really important to remember.
Absolutely. So tragic for the Van Ryn family.
Yeah.
Just crazy all around.
Yeah. Definitely hug your loved ones tonight, man. You never know when the last time you will. It's like, it always makes me think of those times where you read something like, there was a time where you went out to play with your friends for the last time ever, and you didn't know that was going to be the last time. Or like, the last time you're going to be out with your friends doing, going to a certain place. Or
the last time you'll ever hold your child, they get big and you no longer carry them when they're a certain weight. And you never know that when you set them down that day, that was going to be the last time.
Yeah. And I hate looking at it from that perspective because it's so sad. So I like to look at things from the, the future positive perspective, where it's like, well, you know what? I'm going to have some other cool things that I'm going to experience.
Right.
So.
Right. It's hard not to just spend your life crippled with fear. Because you could, if you allow yourself to, you could.
Yeah, just live the best in the moment right now.
Yeah,
look around you, be grateful for what you have, no matter how bad things are. Something's decent in your life.
Yeah, appreciate what you do have, not what you don't have.
Yep. So what we have are some fantastic listeners, and if you love what you hear, thank you very much. Yep. Thank you so much for being here. But if you want to listen to more episodes, we've got Patreon for you to go over to. We've got Apple subscriptions, all those things. And if you want to support us for free, just follow us, like whatever podcast listening service you're listening to us on, Apple, Spotify, whatever. Just press that plus or follow button, because make sure you do it because then it'll kind of rocket us up those charts and everything. So go check it out. Leave us a 5-star review. But yeah, we have access to over 100 bonus episodes if you're so inclined. So give it a shot.
And we are on YouTube too. So if you don't mind popping on over there and subscribing to that channel too.
Yeah, just give it an old subscription, pop a little comment in there like boppity boppity ba.
And we also have a blog.
We do. We just redesigned it. So it's coming along, and let us know what you think. crimeandcoffeecouple.com.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for being here. We appreciate each and every one of you. And until next time, bye.